IFAF Training Tape 2021. Falsa partenza. Regola 7.1.2. False partenze. Ciascuna delle seguenti azioni è una falsa partenza per la squadra A se si verifica prima dello snap e dopo che è stato dato il ready for play e tutti i giocatori sono in formazione di scrimmage. 1. Qualsiasi movimento di uno o più giocatori di A che simuli l'inizio di un'azione. 2. Lo snapper che si sposta in un'altra posizione. 3. Un uomo della linea ristretta, regola 2.27.4, che muove la mano di scatto o fa qualsiasi movimento rapido. Vediamo le eccezioni. Non è falsa partenza se A. Un uomo di linea della squadra A reagisce immediatamente quando minacciato da un giocatore della squadra B nella zona neutrale. B. Non è una falsa partenza se lo snapper toglie la mano dalla palla purché ciò non simuli l'inizio di un'azione. 4. È anche falsa partenza quando un giocatore in attacco fa un qualsiasi movimento rapido a scatti prima dello snap, incluso ma non limitato a un uomo di linea che muove il piede, la spalla, braccio, corpo o il collo, con un rapido movimento a scatti in qualsiasi direzione. Lo snapper, spostando o muovendo la palla, muove il pollice o le dita, flette i gomiti, scuote la testa o abbassa le spalle o le natiche. Il quarterback fa qualsiasi movimento rapido a scatti che simuli l'inizio di un gioco. Un back simula la ricezione della palla facendo qualsiasi movimento rapido a scatti che simula l'inizio di un gioco. 5. La squadra in attacco non si ferma mai per un secondo prima dello snap dopo che è stato dato il ready for play. Questa è una shift illegale che si converte in una falsa partenza. Nel MOFO andiamo alla sezione 3.2.2. Definizioni. Esempi di falli evidenti che dovrebbero essere chiamati anche se potrebbero essere ignorati come non gravi. F. False partenze da parte di un back, tight end o ricevitore. Nella sezione falli senza contatto, sezione 3.3.3. Il movimento di A non è falsa partenza a meno che 1. Non muova uno o entrambi i piedi, 2. Sia improvviso o di scatto, 3. Faccia sì che un difensore si muova in reazione al suo movimento. Se un running back sbaglia il conteggio allo snap, fa un movimento improvviso e poi si ferma bruscamente, è una falsa partenza. Se generalmente stava andando in movimento, non si fermerebbe. Infine, se è in dubbio sul fatto che il movimento sia stato prima dello snap o no, non lo è stato. Non essere troppo tecnici e pignoli su questo.
For an illegal snap, obviously we're looking at the snapper, the center, and we'll notice here how he does a very slight double pump before he snaps the ball, which of course is illegal. And in these situations we do ask for 3 flags here because both wings should be looking at least to the center. Or to the center on his side of the ball, and the umpire needs also to be in a position where he can see the snap. So we should have 3 flags, and we got one from the umpire here, I believe, but the 2 wings also should be involved. Again, here we'll see the snapper just do a little tweak, and if we miss this looks like a neutral zone infraction where the defense moves, causing the offense to react. But good focus by all 3 officials. We've got 3 flags, which is good. This is exactly how we want this handled, and good job by the wings to come in quickly to get a quick conference, and we can move on with the enforcement. In this situation, again we have a flinch by the center, and then the ball goes, and that's typically how it goes. That the ball is snapped right after the flinch, so the wings and the umpire really have to do a good job of shutting this down very, very quickly, and they do a good job here of coming in, blowing the whistles, shutting it down, so we don't have any extra activity after. So again, correct call by these guys. This final example is a good illustration of how small the movement can be and how alert we have to be on the line of scrimmage and as an umpire, because this is a very small move, but it is a little flinch, it is a little jerk, and this is correctly called. Would have liked to have the wing across the field in on this also, so that we get all 3 flags. But again, good shutdown and a perfect call. For this type of false start, initially we're looking at the entire group of offensive players, and everybody's moving around. Now everybody has to sit, get stationary for a full second, so it's not enough that 10 get stationary and then the tackle closest to the camera here does this almost sumo type start where he shoots out right as his hand touches the ground. So even though he is the only one left moving, we still have to have all 11 stationary for a second for this not to be a foul. And when in question, we would much rather have this as a false start as an illegal shift, but in this case this should have been called as a false start. The same principle applies here. As a wing, you're looking at the entire formation and you notice that not everybody is set, and then if we look at the tight end here, he never really gets to be set, which means and the tackle doesn't either. So we kind of have to have that sense that that we're looking for everybody to get set, and if that doesn't happen, then we have to be ready to shut it down. Even though it doesn't, you know, when they're coming up like this, it doesn't look like the ball is ready to be snapped. So we have to really be ready to shut this down, because this is not an illegal shift. This is a false start, and we shut this down correctly. This is some sort of a punt formation, but the same principles apply. And here the wingback nearest to the camera, he never really gets set, and you could argue that the slot back hardly gets set either. And there are several players also on the other side of the ball. So again, you really have to be, as a wing, you have to be ready to kill this, even though it doesn't look like the snap is imminent, because again, this is a false start. On this play, obviously, initially we're looking at everybody moving, but then we're looking at the slot back at the top of the screen, who's going to be the culprit here. So he goes into motion before everybody gets set, and he is, you know, pretty much in legal motion, or the motion part is legal, but so if everybody had been set before he went into motion, that would have been legal. But because he starts before the entire line goes down and he is still in motion at the snap, this is illegal, and this is the type of thing we want to shut down for false start. We don't want this to turn into a 50-yard pass or a 40-yard pass for a touchdown, and then we pull it back for a technical foul here. So we would much rather shut it down, false start, and move on to the next play. Same principle applies here. Everybody's moving around, so we know that that's a factor. And then, you know, right now number 2 goes into motion while people are still moving around. That needs to be an indicator for the wings that this is a potential issue, because if he's still in motion when the ball is snapped, which is the case here, simply because he goes into motion while people are still moving around, both the tight end or what would be the tight end and the split end here are moving around, this would then convert into a false start. So here we have a little bit more, it's not as surprising, we have a little bit more time to think about it, that this could be a problem because number 2 goes into motion. So as soon as the ball is snapped with him in motion, this is a false down that we need to shut down. Here teammate comes out of a huddle, and obviously everybody is moving now, and it's a little bit of an indicator that 4 receivers go to one side. It's probably not what they want, and sure enough, here he comes, the last one, and even though he's the last one to move, he never really gets set. So again, this is everybody has to set, and they don't, so this is correctly called as a false start for never getting set. Here's another punt formation with the offense only having 10 players on the field, and here comes number 11, and we go into the mechanic. Now the MoFo doesn't specifically say anything about this, but it's my experience that in scrimmage kick formations, it's a lot better, or it can be beneficial, to let the umpire cover the ball up as opposed to the center judge. Here the center judge tries, and here he's right there as the ball is snapped, and he's nowhere near ready for the ball to be put into play. But that's a different story. If we're looking at the 11th guy coming in, I don't know if that you can argue that he actually manages to stand still. He certainly is not stationary as the ball is snapped, and far from having a full second there. So this is correctly done, correctly shut down as a false start. These last two examples are of situations where it's just too marginal for us to call. We can let this go and still move on with the game. Everybody gets set. Everybody is stationary. The defense knows where everybody is. Everybody knows the snap is imminent. We may not have a full second if you want to go frame by frame, but I think this is one that we can leave alone and move on with life. The same principle applies here at the last example. They're coming out of their huddle, everybody's moving, and then the last receiver at the top of the screen just barely is set before the ball is snapped. But again, the defense knows the ball is being snapped. They know where everybody is. They're ready for it. So I think we can leave this one alone, even though technically it may not fulfill the 1 second provision. But I think if we start calling these, then there's a whole lot of other stuff that we have to call to be consistent, and nobody wants that many flags. In this first clip, we're looking at the guard closest to the camera, and it's not a violent move. It's not a big flinch or anything, but just leaning back like this is a simulating the start of the play, and this is a false start that we need to call. And this ideally should be called by either the umpire, since he's focused on the guards and the center, or the line of scrimmage official, the line judge here at the bottom of the screen. Either one of those, or both of these officials, could and should call this. On this play, we're looking at the tackle closest to the camera, and while the last one was more of a lean, this is a typical flinch where he needs to get into pass protection, which is why he's flinching backwards. But this certainly is big enough that we need to call this. We need to shut this down very quickly, and correctly called by the wing here at the bottom. And I like the fact that, you know, when there's only one flag, which is typical on a tackle like this, the wing can go straight into a prelim and just relay the number, and we can move on with the announcement and the next play. On this play, we're looking at the guard closest to the camera, and we certainly could also talk about the legality of this formation, but for the purposes of this training tape, we're just talking about this guard and the way that you know, he wants to pull, and he just gets out a little early, starts leaning back there. And again, this is not a flinch or an abrupt movement, but it is something that we need to call, and it's correctly called by this umpire. Should also be called by the line judge here at the bottom of the screen. So this one is an interesting situation. We're looking at the guard away from the camera, and he's going to do a little butt flinch there, and you know, typically when it's a guard we want the umpire and the wing on that side to be looking at it. This move would be very difficult to see for the wing, since the butt there is covered up by the tackle, and from the point of view of the umpire, he's looking from the front there, and that would also be very difficult for him to move. Now, this is a flinch that we need to call, so this is big enough for a call, but this is one of those unusual situations where we can get help from the referee or center judge. Now, we wouldn't want them to be focused on the line of scrimmage to the degree where they would miss flinches by the quarterback or the running back. But that being said, this is one of those situations where they certainly could, if their focus is drawn to that flinch, to that move, where they could be asked to help out with a play like this or a call like this, simply because it would be so difficult for the primary officials to see it. On this play, we're looking at the closest guard, or the guard closest to the camera, and this is a good example of a situation where it's really, really important to have sound pre-snap routine with your whistle. So here the guard moves just a fraction of a second before the snap, but this is enough for a false start. But it's also a situation where the ball is snapped and we have action in the box that we want to shut down. So if we have to start looking for our whistles and picking it out, the action is allowed to continue for way too long. On the other hand, if we're quick on the whistle, you notice here the referee or the umpire has his whistle in his mouth so that he's ready to blow and throw, and do that very quickly. He does that very well here. Then we can shut it down as quickly as we possibly can and avoid too much stuff going on in the middle. So again, correctly called for a false start, correct by the umpire, should also be called by this line judge here at the bottom of the screen. But well done to shut this down very, very quickly as we can. This next one is on the tackle closest to the camera here, and he does this little flinch right there, which is certainly enough for a false start, and correctly called by this line judge at the bottom of the screen. He does a good job of shutting everything down. Now, it's also called by the center judge, and if you're back there as a center judge or a referee, and this happens in your field of vision, it's not wrong to call it. Just make sure that your focus is not so much on the line of scrimmage that you end up missing stuff that happens in the backfield where your primary responsibility is with the quarterback and the running back. Also, now that we have two flags, we have to have this mandatory conversation between the two officials, just to make sure that both officials have the same foul, which we run the risk of this taking a little longer and hurting game flow and the speed of our penalty enforcement. On this last play, we have a somewhat unusual situation with the guard closest to the camera. It's not really an abrupt movement or anything like that, but he turns around, he picks up himself a little bit, and he's nowhere near close to the snap of the ball. And I mean, you could argue that this is not simulating the start of the play, but he is nowhere near. And we would just have a terrible situation. Let's say we let this go because it doesn't fit the typical standard false start, and then the offense scores a touchdown, and now we have to explain to the defensive coach why this wasn't shut down. It's just so much easier for us and for game management to shut this down as a false start, so we don't have a play, we just have a 5-yard penalty, and everybody could see, well, 78 wasn't ready and he was moving around, so we go with a 5-yard penalty and move on with life. And that just, to me, is a much better solution. Again, this could or should be called by the wing here at the bottom, and the umpire, who should be able to see this movement and see this just looks weird and messy is a good way to describe it. In this first example, we'll see the quarterback commit a false start, and what he does is very typical, especially on pass plays. So he starts to lean back before the ball is snapped, and that is may not be a jerky move as such, but it is a simulation of the start of the play, and just like a running back can't lean forward, the quarterback can't lean backwards. So this is correctly called, and a good situation or a good example of why it's important for referees and center judges to have their primary focus in the backfield, because if your focus is too much on the ball or on the line of scrimmage on the offensive line, there's a tendency to miss this because it's not a flinch that you would normally be drawn to. So the advice here is to keep your primary focus at least in the backfield so that we don't miss these. There are really three types of typical quarterback false starts. The first one was the lean back that we saw on the previous play. The second one is the head bob, which you can see in the shotgun. We don't see it as much anymore as we did when the quarterback was typically under center. And then there's this last one where in this example it's not quite enough for a flag, but certainly enough for talk to, which is the chucking of the arms, the way he moves them forward as he is saying his cadence. If this were to be any more flinchy or jerky, then this could certainly be a false start. Here I'm okay with this being called as a defensive offside, but I would certainly talk to this quarterback, talk to his coach, and get him to keep his arms stationary or don't move them as much, because he is right at the border of what we can allow before this turns into a false start. In the first couple of examples, we're going to look at movement that is not enough for a false start. So here the running back is just going to make a little adjustment there. That is not the kind of flinch or jerky movement or a simulated start of the play that we're looking for in a false start. So this movement right there is just an adjustment. It's pretty close to the snap, but it's not what we're looking for in a false start. On this play, the running back doesn't really move as much as he just kind of leans forward a little bit before the snap. But really, this is not enough for us to call a false start. Certainly could be a talk to and let the running back know that, hey, make sure you don't lean forward before the snap. But at most, this is not what we're looking for in a false start either, as opposed to the plays that we're getting into from now on. If we look at this running back, he simply just misses the snap count, and he jumps too early right there. This is the start of the play for him, and it's just before the ball is snapped. So this is not going into motion. This is way too abrupt. This is a flinch or jerky movement, and certainly too abrupt for us not to call it. And this is what we're looking for in a false start in a running back. Here we're looking at the fullback. There are actually two running backs here, and the fullback is going to do a lean, but the lean is it turns into a little step there right before the snap. So this is more than the lean we saw before, and this is too much for us to ignore or handle with the talk to. And here we have a good situation or a good example of why it's important for the wing or for the backfield officials to focus primarily in the backfield pre-snap. If this referee is looking at the line of scrimmage or the tackle that he may be responsible for after the snap, if it turns into a pass play, then we're likely to miss these types of small flinches in the backfield. So keep your primary focus at least in the backfield, and we will notice and catch these types of false starts by the running back. On this play, we're looking at the movement by the tailback here, the running back, and again, it's just a lean, but it just gets a little bit too big, and we almost get a step there before the snap is or the ball is snapped. So this is too much to let go. And again, good reminder of why, as both the referee and the center judge, to keep your focus in the backfield. So that we catch this, and we have the end zone shot where we can see pretty much what they see. So here's the end zone shot, and here you can clearly see that he starts leaning towards that left side, and his heel actually even lifts off the turf before the ball is snapped. So again, this is big enough that we want to call it, and a good indicator or a good example of why it's important to keep your primary focus in the backfield as referee, center judge, because if you're looking at your tackle or anything else, you may miss this because it's not a flinch, it's not an abrupt movement. In this last example, we're going to see another running back who just mistimes the snap. So he moves up because he thinks here the ball is going to be snapped. Again, this is not the start of a motion. This is way too abrupt in a flinchy or jerky movement, and this is one that we need to call, and I'm glad we caught it here. In this first example, we're looking at both of the receivers closest to the camera. So both the split end and the slot back are going to miss the snap count, and they're going to do this flinch that simulates the start of the play, even though the ball hasn't been snapped. So there's no way that we can say this is the start of a motion or anything like this. So this is something that the wing on this side of the field needs to call and correctly calls in this case. Here's a similar example of the receiver closest to the camera just misses the snap count, and it's very difficult to say that this is start of a motion the way he moves down the field. So correctly called by this wing, and even if there's subsequent movement in the box and the umpire has a flag on somebody in the middle, and there's a doubt who moved first in the middle, as soon as we have a receiver, 99% of the time it will be the receiver who moved first, and we're just going to go with the false start on the receiver because everybody can see the receiver moving first, and that's what we're going to go with. In this example, we're looking at the slot back closest to the camera, and he could go in motion if he wanted to, but right there, that flinch is not a motion type movement. This is simulating the start of the snap or flinching because he thought the ball was going to be snapped. So this is a false start, and we missed this maybe because the wing on this side gets focused in on the defenders moving, or maybe he's just trying to look at too much of the line of scrimmage at once. So my advice would be to keep most of your focus on your side of the ball, at least, so that we don't miss this type of a flinch. In this example, we're looking at A5, the slot back here, and again, he could go in motion. This could be the start of a motion, but it is not, and it is the responsibility of the receiver that a motion, the beginning of a motion, does not look like the start of the play. And I think here it's fairly obvious that he just missed the snap count, and this needs to be called, and was correctly called as a false start on A5. In this last example, we're again looking at the receivers closest to the camera, and they just missed the snap count. I mean, moving forward like that is not beginning of a motion, even though we have to, when it's receivers, we have to give them at least some benefit of the doubt when they start moving, in terms of, could this be start of a motion, or is this a false start? Here, it's clearly a false start. And also, even though the defense is also in the neutral zone, they're also jumping offside, but by the time they do that, and even the guy in the middle close to the snapper, even by the time he makes contact, either physically or by philosophy, when he does that, the play's over, because the receivers have already false started. So we could have a conversation in there between the potentially the referee, the umpire, talking about, well, who moved first, the offense or the defense in the box, and then the linesman here at the bottom can come in and say, well, I'm going to overrule everybody because I had a couple of receivers moving, so that's going to take precedence over anything that happened in the middle.